It began quietly, almost innocently, as all strange internet stories do. A documentary, a small YouTube upload, a moment of curiosity that turned into obsession. The Whittakers, a family tucked away in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, were introduced to the world through raw, haunting footage. A filmmaker had found them living in isolation, their lives marked by poverty, hardship, and the weight of generations who never left home. What was meant to be a portrait of endurance quickly turned into something else. The internet didn't just watch. It dissected, speculated, and mythologized. Every video, every interview, every quiet gesture became content. People wanted to help, but they also wanted to own the story. And that's where Eric Carroll entered the picture. He was not a filmmaker. He wasn't a journalist. He called himself an advocate, a man with a mission to help families in crisis. His online persona radiated confidence, compassion, and a flair for storytelling. He positioned himself as a savior in a sea of chaos, someone who understood what the Whittakers truly needed. At first, it seemed like he was doing something good. Eric began posting updates, connecting with fans, and rallying people to support the family. Donations came pouring in, thousands of dollars from people around the world who felt moved by the family's struggle. But as the weeks went on, questions began to form. Who exactly was Eric Carroll? Where was the money going? And why did every story involving him end in confusion? The early videos of Eric featured him sitting in his car, phone angled toward his face, eyes burning with passion. He spoke about the truth, about protecting the Whittakers from exploitation, about building a better life for them. He claimed he was in contact with the family, that he was managing their donations, and that he was fighting for their rights behind the scenes. But behind that conviction, small cracks began to show. Viewers noticed inconsistencies, details that didn't quite line up, statements that contradicted earlier posts. When asked for receipts or proof of payments to the family, Eric would get defensive. "I don't owe anyone an explanation," he snapped in one live stream. "You either trust me, or you're part of the problem." And for a while, people did trust him. He had charisma, that strange, intoxicating blend of confidence and vulnerability that made his words feel sincere. He talked about growing up poor, about understanding what it meant to be invisible, forgotten. It was believable. It was relatable. It was powerful. Until it wasn't. One morning, a clip began circulating online. Eric in a heated argument with a woman named Amy, a former collaborator who accused him of lying about where the donation money went. She said he had taken funds meant for the Whittakers and used them for personal expenses. Eric denied everything, of course. He called it slander, jealousy, a coordinated smear campaign. But Amy had receipts, screenshots of PayPal transactions, messages that hinted at manipulation, and most damning of all, a voice recording. In that recording, Eric could be heard saying, "They'll believe whatever I tell them." The internet loves a savior story. They want to think someone's fixing it. Let them think that. The internet exploded. Suddenly, Eric Carroll wasn't a hero anymore. He was a headline. Comment sections filled with rage, betrayal, and disbelief. People who had once praised him now called him a con artist. Others defended him, saying he was being set up. For days, his name trended alongside the Whittakers. The story that had started as a quiet look into Appalachian life had now morphed into a scandal of manipulation, lies, and internet theater. But what made it all stranger was that no one could agree on the truth. Eric disappeared for a few weeks. Then, out of nowhere, he returned with a video titled, "They Tried to Silence Me." He sat in his car again, the same angle, the same intensity. He looked tired but determined. "They want you to believe I did something wrong," he said. "But I'm the only one who actually helped that family. Where were all these people when they needed food, when they needed repairs, when they needed care. They talk about receipts. I've got nothing to hide. But I don't need to prove myself to people who never cared in the first place. He paused, leaning closer to the camera. I've been working with people higher up than you think. There are investigations happening right now. I can't say much, but when it all comes out, you'll see who the real villains are. The comments were divided, some applauding, some laughing, some calling for him to be arrested. That was the moment everything shifted again. Because after that video, Eric began claiming that he was in touch with the state police, that he was helping with ongoing investigations into fraud, coercion, and exploitation surrounding the Whittakers. It was a bold claim. Too bold. Within days, other creators began digging. They found no evidence of any police involvement. The West Virginia State Police publicly denied any connection to Eric Carroll, stating they had no record of communication with him or his representatives. But before that denial surfaced, Eric had already used his alleged connections to justify every inconsistency in his story. Whenever someone asked for proof, he'd say, "I can't share details. It's part of an open case." It was a perfect shield. For a time it worked. His followers doubled. He framed himself as a man under attack, persecuted for telling the truth. He said people were trying to silence him because he'd found out too much. It was internet drama turned into mythology, and like all myths, it grew with each retelling. Meanwhile, the Whittakers themselves had no idea about the storm raging online. They didn't see the debates, the accusations, the live streams dissecting their lives. To them, the internet was something distant, abstract, a world of voices and opinions that never reached their porch. Larry still sat outside most mornings, drinking coffee and waving at cars that rarely passed. Betty still worried about the same small things, groceries, weather, her family's health. When asked about Eric Carroll, she said simply, "He came around. Said he'd help. Ain't seen much since." That one sentence said everything. Because while the world was fighting over who had the truth, the people at the center of it all were still living the same life, untouched by the chaos their story had unleashed. Back online, creators who once defended Eric began quietly deleting their videos. Others turned on him entirely. One channel released a 2-hour expose breaking down every inconsistency in his timeline, the donations, the screenshots, the false claims of legal involvement. The video ended with a chilling line. "If this man isn't stopped, he's going to do it again, to someone else." But even as the backlash intensified, something strange started to happen. New accounts began popping up, anonymous profiles posting cryptic messages, defending Eric, attacking his critics, and claiming that everything will make sense soon. Some said they were his friends. Others claimed to be whistleblowers. And one, in particular, claimed to be from law enforcement. Each post added fuel to the fire. The truth, it seemed, had become impossible to find. Eric's story was no longer just about the Whittakers. It had become a reflection of the internet itself, a web of half-truths, egos, and endless speculation. Everyone wanted to be the hero. Everyone wanted to be right. And through it all, one question remained unanswered. Who was actually helping the Whittakers, and who was just helping themselves? As the weeks passed, the drama spiraled into something surreal. Live streams turned into shouting matches. Friendships between creators collapsed on air. Accusations flew faster than facts. And in the middle of it all, Eric Carroll posted again. "You think it's over? It's just beginning," he said. "The people who've lied about me are going to be exposed, every single one of them." He smiled almost calmly. "And when the truth comes out, you'll remember who warned you first." The screen cut to black. The internet froze for a moment, the calm before another storm. No one knew what Eric meant. No one knew if he was bluffing. But everyone knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next would be stranger than anyone could imagine. By the time October rolled around, the story had spiraled completely out of control. What began as a compassionate movement to support a struggling Appalachian family had turned into an all-out digital battlefield, creators versus creators, truth versus fiction, and somewhere in between, the Whittakers themselves caught in the middle, voiceless in the noise. Eric Carroll had become the centerpiece of a spectacle he helped create. For some, he was still the man with a mission, a misunderstood advocate fighting for justice against an online mob. For others, he was a manipulator who had built a brand off of pain and deception. Each day brought new claims. Each night, new videos went up. Every whisper became content. The first real twist came from a man named Brian, another content creator who had been following the Whittaker story since the beginning. He'd positioned himself as a kind of independent investigator, posting updates, commentary, and his own interpretations of what was happening behind the scenes. When the scandal about Eric's state police lie surfaced, Brian was one of the loudest critics. He dissected Eric's words line by line, comparing statements, connecting dots, and calling him out in live streams that pulled thousands of viewers. But then, in a shocking twist, Brian himself got caught in a lie. A leaked voice recording surfaced, one where Brian could be heard claiming he had an inside connection to the state trooper handling the Whittaker investigation. He boasted that his nephew was best friends with a state officer who had told him things. It sounded official. It sounded believable. The problem? Brian didn't have a nephew. When confronted, he admitted it. "I lied," he said in a tense apology video. "I was trying to sound credible. I made a mistake." The damage was done. Suddenly, the two loudest voices in the Whittaker saga, Eric and Brian, were both caught fabricating stories involving law enforcement. The internet was stunned. The truth had become a blur of contradictions and theatrics. Meanwhile, the real family, Betty, Larry, and the others, were struggling under circumstances that had nothing to do with the drama. Their home was under threat due to the septic system issue. The state had given them 30 days to fix it or vacate. They had no money for lawyers, no way to install a system on their granite-based land, and no real understanding of the chaos playing out online in their name. Donations that were once promised had slowed. The same creators who had shouted, "Help the Whittakers," were now too busy defending their reputations or attacking each other to offer real aid. Larry still made short videos, brief, heartfelt clips where he talked about missing his family, about how quiet the house had become. "We miss Ray," he said softly in one of them. "He always hollered good night before bed. It's quiet now. Too quiet." Those few seconds of honesty stood in stark contrast to the circus that had formed around them. Back online, Eric Carroll tried to reclaim his image. He began hosting late-night streams again, painting himself as the victim of an organized smear campaign. He accused other creators, including Brian, of fabricating lies to destroy his name. "They can twist my words all they want," Eric said in one live broadcast. "But I've been helping families long before the Whittakers. I don't owe anyone an explanation. I've got evidence, and when it comes out, people are going to be shocked." The chat lit up with comments, half of them supportive, half demanding proof. His loyal followers defended him fiercely, calling critics jealous clout chasers. Others claimed Eric had deleted old videos that might have contradicted his new version of events. The tension was palpable. Then came the next shockwave, a supposed leaked phone call between Eric and a security guard who had once worked with him. In it, Eric allegedly admitted that he was done with the Whittakers and that there was no money left to give them anyway. It was explosive, if true. But like everything else in this saga, verification was impossible. The internet devoured the clip anyway, with people arguing over whether the voice was truly his. "Sounds just like him." Nah, that's AI. Fake audio. I don't care if it's fake, it's what he'd say. Facts didn't matter anymore. Belief did. The story had turned into a mirror for the internet itself. Everyone looking for validation, everyone convinced they were on the right side. Creators who once united under the banner of justice for the Whittakers now tore each other apart. One made a 3-hour documentary accusing another of exploiting donations. Another released private messages, DMs, and screenshots, claiming to expose the truth. Every revelation led to another counterclaim. Every apology led to another feud. And through it all, the family's name was used like currency. It wasn't long before even Mark Lyda, the original filmmaker behind Soft White Underbelly, the one who first introduced the family to the world, was dragged back into the chaos. Commenters began questioning his motives, his editing, even his compassion. Some demanded he step in and save the Whittakers again. Others accused him of abandoning them. Mark, who rarely responded to online drama, remained silent. But his silence only fueled the fire. He knows something, one user wrote. He's protecting Eric. By now, conspiracy theories were spreading faster than the truth ever had. Some claimed the entire situation was orchestrated, a giant social experiment about internet manipulation. Others believed Eric had been framed by rivals who wanted control of the family's name and likeness. Reality and rumor had fused together. Then came the most shocking twist yet. Late one evening, an anonymous post appeared on a private Facebook group tied to the Whittaker supporters network. It claimed to be from someone close to the case. The message read, "Eric and Patrick are both under investigation. The state knows about the missing funds. Betty's legal team has been contacted. Stay tuned." No proof, no details, no sources. But within hours, the claims spread like wildfire across every platform. YouTube thumbnails shouted, "Breaking news," in bold red text. Creators went live to break down the evidence, even though there was none. For 2 days, the internet erupted in speculation, until a local West Virginia paper quietly published a statement confirming there was no active investigation. The frenzy collapsed almost as quickly as it began. But even after the truth came out, the damage lingered. Trust had evaporated. Eric's supporters felt betrayed. His critics felt exhausted. And the few people who had genuinely wanted to help the family were now gone, burned out by the endless cycle of lies, drama, and outrage. Meanwhile, the Whittakers still had no septic tank, no legal representation, and no clear idea of what had happened to the money raised in their name. Their story, once about survival and family, had become a cautionary tale about the cost of attention. In one of his last known posts, Larry said simply, "People mean well. But sometimes help hurts." It was short. It was quiet. It was real. But few noticed it, drowned out by the noise of the next viral twist. The next leak, the next live stream, the next battle for control over a family who had never asked for any of it. And as the dust began to settle, one thing became clear. The truth had stopped mattering a long time ago. The tension that had been simmering for months finally reached a breaking point. What started as online confusion had turned into full-blown obsession, with hundreds of creators and thousands of viewers picking sides, dissecting rumors, and manufacturing theories faster than the truth could catch up. The Whittaker story, once a symbol of empathy, had now become the internet's most disturbing entertainment. By early winter, the online world around the family was unrecognizable. There were now pro-Patrick pages, pro-Eric groups, and others calling themselves Team Whittaker, each one claiming to be the only legitimate voice for the family. Live streams happened daily, some lasting hours. People fought not just over facts but over feelings, loyalties, and pride. And somewhere inside that chaos, The actual family, Betty, Larry, Ray, and the rest, were living quietly, watching their names turn into headlines and hashtags. Eric Carroll resurfaced first, after a short period of silence. He came back with a tone that was very different from his earlier, emotional videos. He was colder now, more deliberate, more defensive, almost rehearsed. "People have been lying about me," he began in a new video, his voice steady. "They've been spreading rumors, saying I took money, saying I manipulated families. I've had enough of it. I've got everything documented, every transaction, every message, every name. I'm not the villain here, I'm the only one who cared." For nearly an hour, Eric spoke into the camera without interruption, weaving a narrative of betrayal and conspiracy. He said other YouTubers were jealous of his platform. He said they used the Whittakers to get famous. He even claimed that certain people in law enforcement had been watching his movements, trying to frame him for crimes he didn't commit. To his supporters, he sounded like a whistleblower. To his critics, he sounded delusional. Brian, who had been Eric's loudest critic, fired back the next day. In a live stream filled with frustration, he played old clips, showed messages, and tried to prove that Eric's story didn't add up. "You don't get to call yourself a savior when you're sitting on their money," Brian said, voice cracking with anger. "I lied once. Admitted it. But this guy, he's been lying since day one." But the comment section turned against him almost immediately. People were tired of finger-pointing, tired of creators turning the family's pain into digital warfare. "You're just as bad," one viewer wrote. "This isn't about them anymore. It's about ego." And that was true. Because somewhere between the donations and the accusations, the focus had shifted. The Whittakers had become the backdrop to a psychological war of credibility, a competition over who could own the truth. In late November, a strange clip surfaced. It was allegedly a recorded phone conversation between Eric and a man described as his security contact. The audio was muffled but clear enough to catch fragments that shocked the internet. "He's got my phone," one voice said, believed to be Patrick's. "He's controlling it. He's answering my calls." Another voice responded, calm but firm. "Then he's intercepting you. Call the state police. File a report. He's playing you." The clip went on, full of confusion, accusations, and paranoia. Someone mentioned missing calls, phone forwarding, and deleted messages. It painted a picture of manipulation, of surveillance, of total mistrust. And though no one could confirm whether the audio was real, it reignited the fire. If it was authentic, it meant that someone, maybe Eric, had gained access to private information. If it wasn't, it was one of the cruelest fabrications yet. Either way, the internet ate it up. By now, journalists and local reporters had begun to take interest again. Small Appalachian newspapers ran articles trying to clarify what had actually happened with the donations and the videos. They reached out to everyone, Eric, Patrick, even Betty, but few gave real answers. One local reporter who managed to contact Betty wrote that she seemed tired and confused by the attention. "I don't know much about all that," Betty said softly. "They came and said they'd help, and now everybody's mad at each other. I just want my family together again." It was a simple statement, but it cut through the noise more sharply than any live stream could. In the digital space, however, things were only getting darker. New evidence began circulating, screenshots claiming to show Eric forwarding money to unknown accounts, PayPal logs allegedly proving that funds had been misallocated, and long threads accusing him of hiding behind multiple aliases online. None of it could be verified, but that didn't matter. The comments poured in. "Lock him up. He's innocent, they're framing him." None of this would have happened if people just left that family alone. Every post, every claim, every rebuttal added another layer to the chaos. Then came the video that broke everything. A former supporter of Eric, a woman named Angie, released a 1-hour exposé she titled "The Real Eric Carroll." She claimed to have been one of his earliest collaborators, helping manage donations and communication with fans. In the video, she said Eric had pressured her to lie to viewers about where certain funds were going. She read out text messages, displayed screenshots, and even played voice clips. In one of them, a voice that sounded unmistakably like Eric's said, "They'll forget. People always forget. Give them a new story and they'll move on." The clip spread across social media like wildfire. Within hours, Eric's accounts went private. While the internet feasted on every new development, the Whittakers remained silent. Larry was seen briefly in a Facebook video, standing outside the condemned house, looking older than before. He thanked people for caring, but said they needed peace. That same week, a fan started a new fundraiser, separate from Eric, separate from Patrick, promising that, this time, the money would go directly to the family. The campaign raised several $1,000s in just a few days. But then, someone traced the account to a recently created email with no clear identity. The page vanished overnight, and the money, along with the trust, was gone again. The public was finally starting to see the pattern. Every time empathy grew, exploitation followed. Every time hope sparked, someone found a way to profit from it. The story of the Whittakers had become a magnet for self-interest, a cycle of emotional manipulation disguised as charity. And yet, even knowing this, people couldn't look away. By December, the entire ordeal had taken a psychological toll on everyone involved. Viewers began speaking about drama fatigue. Creators who had spent months covering the story suddenly vanished from their channels. A few posted farewell videos, saying they were done with the madness. One woman, nearly in tears, said, "I started this to help a family. Now I don't even know what's real anymore. I can't tell lies from truth. I can't even tell if we helped or hurt them." It was the first time the audience collectively paused to question its own role in the chaos. Meanwhile, Eric's silence didn't last long. He reappeared just before Christmas, in what would become his most controversial video yet. Sitting in his car, as always, he spoke softly, almost like a sermon. "You all think you know me. You think you've seen the truth. But what you've seen is what they wanted you to see. There are people out there who don't want families like the Whittakers to have a voice. I was silenced because I told the truth." He leaned closer to the camera. "They tried to make me look crazy. They tried to ruin my life. But mark my words, the truth always finds its way out. Always." Then, almost cryptically, he added, "When you see what happens next, remember this moment." The video ended abruptly. It was enough to reignite the frenzy. Within hours, his followers began spreading speculation that Eric had proof of a cover-up, that he was about to release files, that the truth would come out on New Year's Day. Others dismissed it as another manipulation tactic. But what everyone agreed on was that something was coming. In the midst of all this noise, a journalist reached out again to Larry and Betty for comment. The couple didn't have much to say. "We just want peace," Larry said. "All this talking, it don't fix nothing." They were living temporarily in another house, away from the cameras. For them, the internet story was just something distant, a storm raging somewhere far away. But the emotional weight was heavy. Betty's health had declined. Larry looked thinner. Their simple lives had become collateral damage in a war of pride and performance. The money that had once been raised to help rebuild their home had vanished into the hands of people they'd never met. And still, the world talked about them, not to them. As the year came to an end, the entire saga had turned into something almost surreal, a modern-day parable about exploitation, belief, and the power of narrative. The Whittakers story had started as an act of empathy. But now, it was a cautionary tale, proof of what happens when compassion meets the chaos of the internet. Eric Carroll was no longer just a person. He had become a symbol of manipulation, of ego, of the blurred line between advocacy and exploitation. And for the people who had followed every post, every clip, every rumor, there was one collective question that lingered. How much of this had ever been real? By January, the noise had finally started to fade. The once explosive saga surrounding the Whittakers, Eric Carroll, and the online creators who'd turned their lives into a spectacle had grown eerily quiet. The videos slowed. The arguments stopped. For the first time in months, the internet seemed to lose interest, but not before leaving behind a trail of confusion, pain, and irreversible damage. For the people inside the story, however, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Larry still lived in the same small town, walking the same dirt roads, waving politely to neighbors who looked at him with a mix of pity and curiosity. He no longer talked much about the internet. When people asked about Patrick or Eric, he just said, "We don't see them no more." Betty rarely appeared on camera anymore. Her health had weakened. The constant stress, strangers showing up near the property, and the endless online chatter had worn her down. The once joyful woman who smiled shyly at the camera during Mark Lyda's early videos now preferred to stay inside, away from the world that had promised to help but left her broken. And as for Ray and Timmy, the ones at the heart of the family's emotional story, their return home still hadn't happened. The state's involvement, the failed septic repair, and the fading media attention meant that nothing had changed. The promise of getting the family back together had become another unfulfilled headline. Online, the story had become folklore, a ghost that haunted the corners of YouTube and Facebook. People still whispered about the missing funds, about Eric's final video, about the car Patrick bought. But with time, even those whispers grew tired. New scandals took their place. Still, a few loyal followers refused to let go. A small Facebook group called Justice for the Whittakers kept posting old clips and screenshots, trying to piece together what had really happened. Some claimed they were working with a lawyer. Others said they'd contacted law enforcement. But nothing ever came of it. The truth was simple. There was no investigation. No lawsuit. No resolution. The chaos had burned itself out, leaving behind confusion instead of closure. Eric Carroll, once the face of family advocacy, had disappeared from public view. His social media pages went dark after his cryptic final video. The accounts linked to him, Facebook, Instagram, even YouTube, either vanished or were scrubbed clean. For weeks, rumors swirled. Some said he'd fled the country. Others claimed he'd been arrested. A few even insisted he was planning a dramatic comeback. But no comeback ever came. And the people who had once rallied behind him, defending him, fighting for him, believing in his truth, began to quietly delete their posts, distancing themselves from the chaos they'd helped spread. It wasn't until months later that a local reporter tracked down someone who had once worked closely with Eric. They didn't want their name published, but their words painted a chilling picture. "He got lost in it," they said. At first, he really did want to help. But when the views started rolling in, when people started treating him like a hero, it changed him. The mission became the money. The family became content. He couldn't stop. Even when it all started falling apart, he thought he could talk his way out. They paused. He believed his own lies in the end. Back in Odd, West Virginia, time moved differently. The world had moved on, but for the Whittakers, life returned to what it had always been: hard, quiet, and fragile. The camera crews stopped coming. The calls slowed. Even the donations, once a flood, had become a trickle. Larry started doing small repair jobs again, patching fences and cutting grass for neighbors. Betty spent most of her time resting, watching old shows on the small TV Mark had once bought them. When someone asked Larry if he still trusted people who said they wanted to help, he smiled sadly. Some people mean well. But meaning well don't fix things. Not always. It was a sentence that summed up everything the family had endured and everything the internet had done wrong. The strangest twist, though, came not from Eric or Patrick or Brian, but from the viewers themselves. A quiet reckoning began to take place online. A handful of creators released apology videos, not to each other, but to the family. They admitted they'd chased the drama. They'd built content out of speculation. They'd become addicted to outrage. "We forgot they were real people," one creator said tearfully. "We turned them into characters in a show. And when the story got boring, we made up new parts." The comments under that video were flooded with guilt and agreement. Viewers confessed they'd gotten caught up in the gossip, sharing posts without checking facts, believing lies because they made the story more exciting. The realization hit hard, not just about the Whittakers, but about what the internet had become. For years, people had watched the Whittakers as symbols of poverty, of resilience, of difference. But in the process, the world had forgotten their humanity. They weren't characters. They were a family, flawed, struggling, and private in ways that couldn't be captured on camera. When the online noise finally faded, what remained wasn't a mystery or a scandal, it was a warning. A warning about the power of narrative, about the danger of performative empathy, and about how easily truth can be replaced by entertainment. Months later, Mark Lyda quietly returned to Odd to visit the family again. No cameras, no YouTube thumbnails, just a personal visit. Neighbors said they saw him sitting on the porch with Larry, talking quietly for a long time. No one knows what they discussed, but afterward, Larry looked lighter, not happy exactly, but at peace. When someone asked if Mark would ever make another Whittaker film, he reportedly smiled and said, "Some stories don't need another chapter." As spring came, the house still stood, weathered but intact. Betty's garden started to bloom again, the same small patch of flowers she'd planted years ago. And in that quiet space, away from the noise of social media, the family began to heal in their own way. No more interviews. No more promises. No more internet wars. Just family. The story of the Whittakers, Eric Carroll, and the internet's strangest twist didn't end with a verdict or a revelation. It ended with silence. Not the silence of ignorance or defeat, but the kind that follows a storm, when the world is still, when people finally stop shouting long enough to listen. For those who'd followed the story, it was a lesson that truth isn't always found in the loudest voices, and that sometimes helping means stepping back. And for the Whittakers, the family at the center of it all, it was a return to something they hadn't had in years. Real, fragile, hard-earned peace. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.